Hello, hi, welcome to the first edition of the ALF Brussels. We are quite excited to have two wonderful, brilliant writers with us for the session on the short fiction and the long form. So I'm Sabin Iqbal, the host today to the session. Welcome Ms. Natasha Sharma and Ms. Khushuboo Shah to the session.
Hi, Sabin. I'm so glad to be here.
Thank you. And I don't want to be a stiff, and it can be very conversational. I'm also a writer, so I'm also figuring it out to write it in the long form, to write it in the short form. What are the challenges and all that? So welcome aboard. So
Thank you.
and I'm also very excited to have two writers from two different backgrounds. One is a doctor, eye surgeon, right? Khushbu, you're an eye surgeon, and you're Natasha is a IT from the techie. So it is good, and I'm a journalist. So by training and by profession, but long left journalism to write and to access to work. So let's talk about. I would like to start from the beginning. Before we get into the craft and the challenges of writing short story in the long form, which is novel or novelette. How do you find a story? Let me just start. Either of you. It's not the we can have a conversation, so we can chip in and jump in and cut off. Whether how do we find the story?
I think I'll go first. Khushbu? Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
For me, the story usually, starts by it's maybe a small, a haunting image or a haunting line, that I've read somewhere or someone has said something to me. And when I talk about my first novel, Beneath Divided Skies, the entire story is about the Rescue Restoration Act that happened during the 1947 Indo-Pak partition. And when I stumbled upon it, it sort of triggered a story that my maternal grandfather used to talk about when we were children. And when I heard about the story, I started imagining the women behind it, the kind of strength it would take for them to go back to Pakistan or to come back to India and rescue women. And that's how that specific story found me. And if I talk about the White Noise lullaby, the one for the Asian Prize, it was the exact opposite. I was telling my author friend Monica Singh about the Roopkund mystery, how the entire place is full of eerily full of skulls and skeletons and thousands of folklores about why that happened. And that story sort of just came to, I mean, it kind of wrote itself. Maybe because I love mountains and I love the whole aura of the Rupkund Lake. So sometimes I think stories find me rather than me finding them. It could just be a simple footnote or a simple, sort of half-triggered memory, and they keep haunting you till till you actually sit down and.
Khushbu, is it the same with you, or I mean, different process?
Yes, it is more or less the same. For me, a story is generally it is a thought which is always in one line. This is what I've noticed. The ones which at least finally get developed, of all the thoughts which I put down, and some of them I start working on, the ones which finally reach completion have always been thoughts which at the beginning had only one sentence. It could be just one question, it could be one thought, one bottom line, one what if, but only one sentence. Because then that gives us a lot of latitude to explore, and somehow these have been the ones which have worked for me. So in my case, in my story The Perfect Life, which made it to the shortlist, it was about how flawed can one life be. So it was based on a poem. It's about a poem which is reenacted in real life. So it is the poem of the same name, The Perfect Life, by Ben Jonson. It's quite a well-known poem, and the last line says, in short measure, life may perfect be. So how flawed can any one character be, and yet how can they manage to give meaning and make their life the perfect life, that all these flaws come to a very, very destined and logical end. This is how it should have been. How do I make that come? And then that set the story. In my novel, it's called The Mildly Chaotic World of Chicken. It's a dystopian satire. The question was only about what would happen if humans and animals were to swap places in this world. Would our stand about animal cruelty or commercialism, would everything be the same, or would our stand change? That's all. So it has always
Kind of
been
an
one.
animal, the kind of an animal farm state,
Yes, it
like,
is
what
that.
if they rule the world and they, but I tell you, I've got my first novel, The Cliffhangers, happened when I was in Doha visiting my cousin. We were in a shopping mall, and he asked me to wait there, and he went for something, and I was sitting on the bench there looking around, and then sentence came up to me saying, that day the balloon went up far too high. And as a journalist, I always keep a notebook. I just pulled my notebook out and wrote this down. And immediately I knew that this is about four boys, in Kerala, my hometown, which is Varkala, it's a Twitter. There is a cliff, and these pictures came to me. I said, okay, this is about them, this is their life. And I came back home and I wrote it quite fast, you know. But interestingly, that sentence got edited out. It's not, that is not in the novel.
Talk about
So,
irony.
I know.
yeah, it's not. I mean, even there's a sense, but then yeah, but that takes me to the other point. When you have, okay, we got a thread, we got something that triggered our thought process, and now how do you find the form? Which, whether there's going to be a short story, or I'm going to go crack at taking it to a novel, so that kind of a decision of form, you know. Natasha, if you can, yes,
Okay, I'm being pushed
yeah,
under
yeah,
the bus
go, yeah,
again. Huh?
yeah, go.
Okay, so how do I decide whether the form has to be a short story or long story? So when it comes to short stories, you sometimes when you're writing it itself, and for example, if I'll take the same example of The White Noise. When I try to extend it into a novella form, it's about just short of 10K. The intimacy kind of it resisted, because the intimacy could not, it turned brittle. So sometimes when you're writing something, that beyond a certain point you can't push the story. Or when it came to Beneath Divided Skies, because it was at a larger scale where there were multiple voices, multiple scale, multiple timelines, it kind of needed a larger space, a larger container to hold it. Because most of it, you look at short stories, they are, you need a smaller space, a punchier, emotional punch, a tighter arc for it. It's like a one deep breath, and novels are slightly longer. So with me, I usually experiment to see, whether I can extend the line to a novel. Mostly, it doesn't work that way. Sometimes the stories, at least for me, are they come with their ending in mind. So it usually can't stretch it, beyond a point. And honestly, living with the muse in your brain is like living with a teenager inside your head. Tina Fey she once said that having a teenager at home is like having an office crush. They're very unpredictable.
I
Some
know.
days it's sarcastic, some days they're eye rolling, some days they're tender and chatty, and God forbid, some days they're just silent. So each story comes with its own mood swings, and you have to determine what and where it's going to take you. So with me, that's how it usually sort of, that's how the cookie crumbles, so to speak.
So
Khushboo, what do you think?
in my case, I have two sets. there's one set of cookies which are permitted to crumble the way they want. So I begin writing, and then I realize, okay, this is a very crisp message, and this will need only this much. This will only take only this much space, and I cannot overkill. But like with my novel, I started writing, it was about the dairy industry, and I wanted a very sharp piece of satire, and I had aimed at 2,500 words. But when I started making those characters and the whole world started building itself, and then I realized, okay, this is not going to, I mean, I will not be able to contain it. So what I'll do is I will make it 8,000 words, and then it went to 25,000 words, and then it went to 55,000 words. So it does happen that way sometimes. That is how the cookie crumbles, when I let it. But there is another set when I know that this idea will take, I have this idea, and then I realize that I'll have to work a lot on it. Life will not permit me to do it right now. I just put it aside. I know that this idea is going to need more time, and I just leave it and let it simmer. And then it can go on and on. And I start with ideas which seem like they will do well with short stories. So it goes that way. If I let it, then I start writing, and then it goes the way it goes. But sometimes I restrict myself and I just let the ideas be. I let them simmer. Yeah.
No, it's interesting that V.S. Pritchard, with the writer Pritchard, said short story is something that we glimpse in the corner of our eye. You know, it's just glance. You know, but novel is something that we indulge ourselves in, we jump into. But then, having said that, writing a short story is a challenge, which I believe. I've got four novels out, and I'm just trying to, experimenting with a few short stories. But then, short stories demands a different skill set, right? I mean, because it is a snapshot. I believe it's a snapshot and leaves you there, the reader, because it doesn't give the reader the leeway of of digressions, or this is there. The writer says something and it hits you. So it demands a different kind of skill set than being a novelist. So what do you think of that? When you write a short story or when you attempt a novel, are you conscious of a different skill set, or the language, or the way you perceive the whole story, put it across on the screen? Can we talk about that?
Yes. Should I answer?
Yeah, Khushboo, yes.
Yep.
Reverse the roles now.
So, no, absolutely. I think when we start writing a novel and we are developing the idea on such a large scale, a lot of research goes into it, which is much more than what a short story demands. So that is an entirely different league, I believe, because in short story, your research revolves only around the point you're trying to make. But in a novel, your research revolves around the world you're trying to build. So I think there itself, it bifurcates. Also, I believe in a novel, a lot of things are character driven. You let your characters take you to places. In short story,
I mean, the
you keep.
character arc also, like,
Yes,
what is the
absolutely.
character? The
Character
editors
arc.
often ask us, what is the character arc here?
Yes. In a short story, we would love for the character to have an entire arc, and sometimes they do, because that is what we are trying to show in that short story. But we keep them on a tether. It is very tight. It's on a leash. We don't let them meander here and there. So even the overlay of the supporting characters, the side tracks, all of this is mere clutter in a short story, which even if you write, you end up editing it at the end. Because in a short story, there's a word limit. There's also a pace which has to be maintained throughout. But in a long format, it is life in motion. So you do end up showing a lot of other influences on your character or on your plot. So I believe they are two entirely different things. And as writers, I think maybe we should take a little more credit for being able to do two of these things, more credit to our split personalities than anything else. Yes.
Natasha, you agree with her? Or
I do completely agree with her. I mean, I started off as a short story writer, and the one thing that short stories do teach you is each word that you write in a short story is pulling a double duty, man, because you've got to make sure that in the shortest, tightest arc possible, you are you're talking about you trying to have the deepest kind of impact. Whereas a novel sort of gives you a little more time to, sort of mull over the moral ambiguities or the complexities, gray characters. So I always read short stories. And honestly, when I say short stories, I mean anything above 3,000. I really admire people who can write something in 500 words because it takes you 500 words to just get started.
And
And
we
it's
also have this flash fiction these days.
right. I'm just awful at them. I just cannot compress myself enough.
These stories seem to be getting shorter and shorter with the attention span, and one day we'll have something called a syllable story or a half a syllable story.
It reminds me of this joke, right? Someone said, write a story that has intrigue, royalty, and mystery. And the joke goes, I think the queen is pregnant. I wonder whose it is. Something along those lines. So I
Before
don't
I
know if
move on
that's
to next point, let me just quickly ask this: both of you have a lot of humor element in your writing. So no, this is not part of the long and short form of it, but then writing humor. I mean, how difficult is that, or you enjoy writing humor, or you smile when you write, those lines. And let's dive into that.
okay. I'll
Natasha,
take the bullet for this.
yes, please.
God, I love humor. And I've done my masters, and I remember my professor used to send my papers back saying, Natasha, you cannot put humor in this. So it's so inbuilt in me to put humor in practically everything that I do. Sometimes there are times especially when I was writing my first novel, it's on such a serious topic that I really had to hold myself back. That like not all places deserve humor. And writing humor is the toughest. It's not even a genre. It sort of bleeds into everything. And the best part about writing humor is, oh God, I laugh at all my jokes. More than anybody else. I'm the first one who's laughing. And I think, when you enjoy your work, your words, they carry that sort of energy into them and into the reader. But it is one of the most difficult genres to pull off because humor is so subjective. I mean, when you write about a romance, boy meets girl, they fall in love, or whatever. I mean, you got there's fixed timeline that you have, or fixed sort of a structure that you have. With humor, you can go slapstick, you can go dry, you can go punny, you can go whatever, and it has to have an appeal in the reader that you find. And um, it's a very thin line to that you straddle, that you're not getting offensive but you're still trying to put your point across. So I think it's one of the most difficult genre to write, but it's one of my most favorite genres. And especially when it comes to absurdist humor, oh my God, it's a totally awesome thing to write. And Khushboo, my friend here, is
But jokes are not humor, right? I mean, writing jokes are not writing humor. Humor is that subtle element where you enjoy, you read, and then
right.
it's just you know
It's like the British
wow.
humor. I love the British humor. I've grown up, reading the
Yeah,
British books.
yeah, the British
Um,
humor. Yeah,
I mean, with the exception of no, even if you look at Jeeves and Woostum, that the humor is so subtle. If you don't always get it if you're not looking for it. So it hits, and then the joy is even
it is
doubled
not a
because
ridiculous kind of thing, but the humor writing sometimes for me is like that brooks a smile in you, and then wow, it's interesting. Let Khushboo is brimming to say
yeah.
Yes,
something, so let's listen to it.
But
yes,
I just want
absolutely.
I want to say one
Yes.
thing. Khushbu here, my friend, is so good at wordplay. She's so good at puns. She's so good at sarcasm. She's so good at satire. I mean, it just warms my heart to see someone who's so good.
No, so I'll tell you something, Natasha, because she's the subject of most of my humor. She's the first subject I try it on anyway. The most important reason being, I'm really assured that she will understand it. She will get it. So it is a wrong thing to do because you're starting at the highest. If Natasha understands it, does not mean everyone will. But me being the self, I don't know how maybe it is some kind of psychopathy, but I want to know that yes, my humor was understood. So I will first go to Natasha, I'll crack my joke there, I'll get it approved, and then I'll try it on the world. So it goes that way. But yes, I think humor is the best thing in life and in writing, both. And yeah, with my novel, I went all out. It was a dystopian satire, so I was. It has so much of sarcasm. It has so many puns. It was like that for me, and it was like putting a child in a cotton candy machine, with popcorn in it. So it was. I had a lot of fun when I was writing that book. But I do believe that humor is like a sharp knife, and we must use it with a lot of caution when we are writing, because it can really slice through. It can make you have all these pretty slices of cake, but at the same time, you do it a little wrong, or you overdo it a little bit, or you slice through a few, sensibilities, and you end up massacring the entire piece. So I think the reason why humor is difficult is in knowing when to restrain yourself. It is a very restrained form of writing. You cannot just, much as we would like to include also, after writing humor, it is so difficult to edit because you'll so love your joke and you do not want to chop it off, but you realize it is doing nothing to your story and you must remove it. And it is so difficult to edit when you write humor.
Something called in editing, something called killing your darling.
Yes.
Yes. No, and we don't delete those lines. We store it in another document.
Now,
somewhere they could be used.
Absolutely. So
let's move from humor to some more serious issues like Alice Munro. She started out as a novelist, and she abandoned writing novels and got into writing short stories and won Nobel Prize. So, and she said, short story writers are not paid novelists; they are masters of a difficult art. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, how do you look at it? I mean, we are not a failed, short story writers are not failed artists, but masters of a difficult art. So do you agree?
can I'll go first.
Yes.
So in a way, I do agree, because it is almost like you grow wiser with age, and you can convey the same thing in one sentence what would have taken you a paragraph maybe a decade before. Okay, so in some ways, short stories may be able to pack a lot in a very short format, and it needs a lot of expertise and a lot of wisdom to write a very good short story. What happens is we start out with writing short stories and then graduate to writing novels. That is how it goes. But I believe after you start writing novels also, we must again explore a short story format after a few or several years of writing, because that experience shows. When I read now my short stories which were written before and the ones which are written now, I can see a lot of difference, and I've seen this with the works of a lot of people. So in a way, she's right in what she's saying. However, I believe these two are two different colors, so you cannot really compare them, which is better. They are two different entirely two different things. Just because it is a story does not mean you can compare a novel and a short story. So I think they're both great in their own rights. But yes, short stories, when we start out writing short stories, maybe we are not all that great at it, and maybe later on with practice we do become better at it.
I'm just going to add one line. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Natasha, please.
I was just going to say one thing, that short stories and novels, they sort of share the same DNA. But like how siblings, how we come from the same mother and father, but we can be so completely different. That's how you can put into perspective a short story and a novel. Short story requires a lot more skill, and as Khushuboo said, that very true. When you look back at the work that you've done earlier, it is honestly awful. And it's sort of the imposter syndrome just sort of hits you. But how bad was I so many years back? But yes, the more you learn, the better you get, and you must go back to writing short stories as often as possible because it keeps you honest and it keeps you grounded to a large extent, so that you don't get so full of yourself. So mostly.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I mean, now we discussed novels and short stories, but let me just ask you, what is a good short story in your book? In your opinion, what is a good short story? I read one. Okay, wow, it's a good one. So, what is a good short story? What are the characteristics of a good short story?
Now that's a difficult one to answer for the simple reason because you don't know what that short story. I mean, I might like a slice of life kind of a short story, which is not really doing anything as such. It's just sort of narrative of something that's happened, or if it like I'm someone who writes more about women and their problems, or the kind of struggles that women have faced. So for me, a short story would be something that can talk about the characters, the problems that she faced, kind of the kind of how she became or how she emerged victorious. So for me, that is the more important arc that I usually like to see. But having said that, there are some stories that really don't go anywhere, but they're fun to read. So that I have also written some of those kind of stories, which are really they just meander into nothingness and sort of escape into something. But I think a short story should have a very tight protagonist, because if you have a tight protagonist, you will be able to build the life around them. Generally, thumb rule is that you don't have more than two characters or three characters at best, because having a lot of characters woven into the story means you need a lot of backstories for them, and dialogue, and if you have word limit restrictions. um, you have a lot of negative space in a short story. You may not be able to explain in detail, and then you kind of let the reader leap into conclusions. So and of course the plot has to have some sort of cohesive timeline around it. I mean, as for me, these are the four important ones. I'm sure Khushboo has more.
No, I believe Natasha has already covered the. I mean, she's broadly covered everything. So no, for me, there is only this one compulsion I have, that when I write a short story, I want the reader, or even when I read one, I want to at the end of it feel, I didn't think about that. That's
Mm.
it. It could be a surprising ending. It could be a character who I had never imagined would do something, which that character ends up doing ultimately. It could be just the treatment of a subject being treated in a particular way, and this person treating it in a different way. Something like that. There has to be that one pull the rug thing in a short story. It has to be very crisp, it has to be very tight, and it has to be that. I don't really care about how the character, I don't want the writer to tell me how the character looks. I will imagine it. And it should be enough, I believe, because for that short what do you say, space that you get to write, I do not want that. I want the plot to move forward fast, and arrive at that moment when I say, I didn't think about that. It almost always happens with O. Henry stories, or so many of those Saki stories that we used to read. And I believe they make for the best short stories for reading. As a reader, I want that to happen all the time. Yeah.
So we that surprise element, that twist kind of thing, right? So wow, I didn't expect this coming all the way. So that is it. But when it comes to novel, it's a saga, right? I mean, you both attempted novel. So there is something called mid novel crisis. You start, you know the ending, but then there's a middle portion. I always compare it with when I take classes for on and creative writing. You say it's like when you compare sprint 100-meter dash, you begin your end over, but it's a marathon. You go on and on and on, and there is a mid-marathon crisis, something called in athletics, mid-marathon. So I always think about what is the mid-novel crisis, because you are there, you're writing every day, you're not ending. It's a long process. You're not sure where it's going to take you. So have you come across this kind of a mid, because this is very typical of when you write long form. It's a long form. as you said, short story, you begin, you finish, you know that's over. But the novel, they really test your endurance, your stamina as a writer. Because writing at the end of the day is a long, lonely, painstaking effort. You sit down and no one needs to support you. You and your It's a painstaking effort. So in that scenario, when it's become that is a mid-novel crisis, have you experienced this? Number one, or if you have, how have you overcome it? So I don't know whether it's true of you, but then I'm just you know sometimes as a novelist is someone swimming in the sea. You can't see the shore. You just keep swimming. You can't stop swimming either. You will drown. So
Yes.
you know, let's talk about that situation.
Yes. Natasha?
Thank you for
And
pushing
that
me
is
under the bus
at
again.
sea.
Okay, so when I was writing Beneath Divided Skies, so there is this sort of a romantic turn that happens somewhere in the middle of the book. And I realized that if the twist that I had sort of portrayed would turn readers off or make them feel betrayed. And I realized and I was kind of stumped for a while because that twist had to happen. I mean, there's no way around it. It has to happen. But how do you put it across, without making it without sort of betraying readers? I don't know if I'm really answering your question correctly, but this is how it happened to me. So what I did was, with a very, very heavy heart and lots of backup, I went and deleted everything that I wrote. And then I sat with it for a couple of days. And I'm actually blessed to have a fabulous writing circle. My beautiful friends, like there's Khushboo, there's Monica, there's Lalita, there's Sangeeta, and we sort of get on a Zoom call, and I sometimes explain to them that this is the crisis that I'm facing, and we all kind of pitch in with, I mean, in my case, they all pitched in with their suggestions. Of course, I didn't take any of them. I did what I had to do. It kind of opens you up to ideas that you had not thought about. And so when it comes to a mid-novel slump, or I don't know, challenge, crisis, whatever, it does happen at times. It happened to me in my second novel also, where I was slumped for a while because it was a mystery novel, a genre that I love, but is the most painful to write. And that's where I suffered the most. In fact, I had called up Khushboo, and we would be over the phone and trying to uh, you know sort of get a way out. So at least in my case, I don't know if it's specific for us, but mostly I do dip into my friend circle, and they kind of drag me out of the slump. But it does happen. It does happen because you may know the end in sight, but you're kind of muddling through at one point in time. You don't know if you are going in the right direction, if you have become boring, or you've sort of become something the novel is turned into something which is not really palatable to others. So it did happen to me, and thanks to my fabulous girl gang, I came out of it. But I would not know what others would do. I mean, I have no idea how you would.
And Khushboo, what do you think of it?
Yes. So, in my case, I plot my novel like a psychopath is plotting murder. So,
And I'll give that to you. She does.
yes. So there's this folder, and then in that there'll be every chapter, and then in every chapter, exactly from what point to what point the story will go, and then what character will do, and all those things. I plot everything before I start writing. Okay, that does not mean that my plan things go according to plan. They don't. The characters dictate a lot of things. I change and I improvise, but broadly speaking, I have every character. So what you're talking about, this mid-novel crisis which you're talking, happens to me with mid-chapter crisis. Initially, when I'm planning and everything, because then I know how it's going to end, I know how it is starting, somewhere in the middle, and it always happens. It is with my first novel, it is also with what I'm writing right now. I end up having a lot of parallel things which are happening, and they are happening at the same time. So you can obviously write those parallel tracks and then bring them together. They generally tie up neatly in the end. The problem is, through the story, I have to also intersect them, because I cannot just parallelly show them. It's not a collection of short stories. I have to intersect them. Now, in this story, in this novel which I'm writing currently, that has led to a major crisis. And at the end of it, you would not believe, now I have one folder which is called Nagging Worries. It genuinely is called Nagging Worries, in which chapter wise I have written, in this chapter I have not included that character or that arc, but has to be included. So while I'm writing chapters, I'm writing Nagging Worries, which I'll have to revisit, and I'll have to end that way. Okay, so this does happen, and in my case it happens this way. Having said that, how do I overcome it? I have the same circle of friends which Natasha, we are part of the same circle, and I have an entirely opposite, the exact opposite approach to what Natasha does. So Natasha, when she gets stuck, she wants all of us to listen to it and all of us to give our 2 pence and then not take it and then write her thing. And I become so super secretive. If anybody asks me something, don't talk about something else. Talk about something else. So that is how I deal with my mid-novel crisis. I just let it simmer at the back of my head and I start with some other chapter, because I already have my chapters planned. I take some other track, I write something else, and then eventually what happens is, the other track and the way it leads gives me some kind of traction that I should pull my story in that direction. So generally what happens is, after I resolve a few other tracks, this track gets on track. So that is how my mid-novel crisis
Very interesting. Let me interrupt you. Maybe we have only 10 minutes left, not even that. But then I want to ask you this. There is a new form of writing, not interconnected. It's short stories, but they're interconnected. Then it becomes a novel. You know what I mean? These are not strictly short story collections, not the classic novel form either. There are short stories. They're in the form of short stories. The characters overlap. Say they do. I mean, you know about it. So how do you look at it? So because you're a short story writer and a novelist, now there is a blend of both. You can. I mean, do you like to experiment in that form, or how do you look at it? Or it's neither this or no that. So it doesn't have a character of neither a short story or a novel. So how do you look at it?
You mean like Malgudi days? Something like that?
Kind of thing, yeah. I mean, there are some other new novels coming out,
Okay.
the contemporary novels.
I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be honest.
Huh?
I would not know. I'm more of a novelist. I like novels because I like to talk, as it's very obvious and apparent in this interview. So I would always prefer something which sort of gives me the leeway to write. Having said that, I don't mind experimenting because I love experimenting different types of crafts, and I keep trying out new books and I keep bombarding these guys with the idea that I've got, and likewise they do it to us. I don't mind experimenting with it, but given a choice, I like my long form. I'm partial to it.
Yes. So
And
I have not actually read one on the lines of what you're saying. So I also only have experience with these short stories which are standalone, but they actually are interconnected, or they have characters which overlap. So that is the kind of thing I have so far read, and I get exactly what you're trying to say. I haven't read it. So as a reader, I don't know how I'll feel about it. However, as a writer, I'm open to it. If for some reason my characters are having just very different experiences and the endings are very different and not interconnected, but the characters are having that, and that does happen in life. Characters may be interconnected, but their endings are just so vastly different and there is no overlap in the endings. So it can happen that way, and if a story or a couple of stories do come up which require that kind of format, I would not hesitate in trying it out. I believe the skill set required would be a marrying of these two skills, of writing a short story and writing a novel, and I don't know how I'll navigate that. I'm not sure of that, but yeah, if a situation ever presents like that, I would try. Yeah.
Okay, before we wind up, let's uh, you know discuss the editing process. How do you look at the editing process? I, for a writer, I need an editor. Okay, I have no, because I sometimes, I don't know whether you've read my novels or not. I got four of them, but but sometimes I tend to overwrite, sometimes I tend to underwrite certain parts. So I believe that editing and writing are two entirely different skill sets. You know, so a good writer is a good editor. That's what I think. So how do you look at it? Because especially editing short stories requires a lot of skill because you can't make a mess of it. In novel there is room to recover, but in a short story you don't have that space. So how do you look at the editing process by yourself or editor from the publishing house?
Should I answer that?
Yeah, yes.
Yes. So I think both are very important. Editing by ourselves first, because sometimes we realize what we're trying to say is not clear. So editing by ourselves first, yes, absolutely. And I believe that a good writer can, not a good writer, a writer who ends up having a good work, a piece of work, is always a good editor. We might be a good writer, but if we are not able to edit well, we will not be able to polish the piece correctly.
Right.
And it is at the end of the day our child. So we must know how to polish it. It cannot be done entirely by somebody else. So we need to do our editing. At the same time, I do believe it is very important to have a separate set of eyes which look at it, and which Natasha and I both agree is Monica Singh in our case, because she brings magic into this. So we must have some, in Natasha's case, maybe this life's karma. In my case, definitely, most certainly, past life karma, good karma, which has helped us have. But we do need, and it is always easy to. Even as a writer, I feel if I am editing Natasha's story, which by the way, the interesting thing is both of us have edited our submissions to Asian Prize. I was the one who has had a look at her story. She was the one who has had a look at my story. And so for both of us, when we got shortlisted, we were like, we are winning this anyway, because whoever wins it.
Absolutely.
So it is always easy to point out mistakes in someone else's child. It is always easy from a third person point of view. So it helps to have someone else edit it. I would be a better editor with Natasha's story than I would be with my own. So I believe both are important. But yes, to answer your question, after we are done with whatever we do, it is the editors bring so much value to the piece in every way, which we deny that to ourselves because we are not objective enough. How many ever drafts you make? Yes.
Thank you so much, and I think that brings to end of a wonderful conversation. I think it's more than a session; it's a conversation, between three writers. And so, thank you so much for making it, interesting, and a lot of humor in it, a lot of thought-provoking points, a lot of challenges. Thank you so much, both Natasha and Khushuboo from the ALF Brussels team. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure, Sabin.
Thank you for having us here. It's been lovely. Thank you.